Knowles, can I see it?
I finally see you from across the country. I'm out of that office so much now. We have to Skype in via all the satellites. I feel like we're 3 years ago again.
What is going on? Why are you traveling around so much?
Well, because Ben won't let me back into the office. That's the proximate cause.
I knew there was
The
something I liked about that guy. Yeah.
I'm giving a couple speeches down in Florida at FSU and at Embry. So if you're in the Florida area, come by and check it out. And you know what I did this morning? Because it's been kind of a wild ride. I've been doing all these things. Is I woke up early and I went and saw The Front Runner this very morning. I was just about the only person in the movie theater. And thanks a lot. I have a lot to do. I have to write all these speeches, and you've wasted my entire morning on this.
It was bad? Was it bad?
No, it's a movie that never had to be made.
Well, you have to tell people what it's about first, because not everybody remembers this.
Nobody remembers this. If there is anybody less deserving of a movie about him than Gary Hart, I'd like you to point him out for me. Gary Hart was the front runner in the 1988 Democrat primary before it began. He was a senator from Colorado. He first ran for president in 1984. He got beaten by Walter Mondale. That's about all that you need to know. Very famously in 1984, Walter Mondale, the man who Reagan beat by all of the states.
He was such a dynamic character.
In 84, Mondale turns to Gary Hart, and he was echoing the Wendy's campaign ad, and he said, "Mr. Hart, where's the beef?" Because Gary Hart was basically a hairdo and a bunch of teeth and didn't have a whole lot of substance to him. So he becomes the front runner. He loses in 84. He becomes the front runner in 88. The trouble with this movie is that it never had to be made. Most books could be essays. Most essays could never be written. This movie could have been 15 minutes long. But that said, also Hugh Jackman was miscast because he wasn't nearly glib enough to be Gary Hart.
Yeah, he got a lot of presence, Hugh Jackman. It's hard to make him seem.
That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman is far too substantial a person to play Gary Hart.
Yeah.
But there is a lot to enjoy here. The movie is essentially about how awful Democrat politicians and the media are, how just destructive and corrupt and undignified they are. So that's pretty enjoyable. You sort of think, what's not to like? I really enjoyed every moment that I was in watching the movie. The other trouble with it is that it takes Gary Hart's side a little bit too much.
Wow.
It tries to make him out to be a serious person, a thoughtful candidate, someone who was trying to preserve the dignity of never having his sex scandals exposed. Because this guy was a cad. He got caught famously on a yacht with a blonde lady sitting on his lap, and the name of the yacht was Monkey Business. he was planning, Senator Hart.
I mean, one of the things about him is he was Bill Clinton before there was Bill Clinton. Everybody knew what he was doing. The press covered up, and it was only because he dared the press to come after him that they finally came after him.
Well, that's right. This is a pivotal moment. Is they start asking a couple questions. Everyone knows that he's sleeping around, and he says, "Follow me around. Follow me around with a camera. You're going to be very bored." So they follow him around, and they catch his mistress walking out of his house. That part I think is pretty good. The film, the reason why it doesn't succeed, even though there's so much promise there, it's only got about 50% Rotten Tomatoes, critics and audience, and it just about deserves that. I'd give it a C, probably, maybe a C+. But the interesting thing about the movie is it delves into these central conflicts within the left. What do they do? I mean, we've been dealing with this between Bill Clinton and the Me Too movement. We've been looking at that major conflict. But the major question of the movie is, did the press go too far? Are politicians entitled, like LBJ, like JFK, like FDR, like every other Democrat politician who slept around, are they entitled to not have their mistresses in the press? And the film seems to side with Gary Hart on privacy, but it was the left that decided in the 60s and 70s the personal is the political. We're going to go against everybody personally. We're going to bring this up. It gets the history wrong a little bit, too, because we've had sex scandals in this country since Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. There's nothing new there. And the same question about the media. What is the role of the media? Are the media going to speak truth to power, go after these guys, root around in their back alleyways, or are they going to pal around with them and hang out at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and go to parties with them and just be their buddies and cover up? The film is so confused on these questions, but the left isn't any less confused. So the fact that a movie with a left-wing slant was able to explore those questions, I think that's basically a win for conservatives. It's just too bad nobody's going to watch it.
I was there. I was in the news business when this happened, and when this story broke, I was in the news business. And this is one of the last times in my life I ever got into shouting matches with people, because the bosses were coming in. I worked at a radio station that was known then as the New York Times of radio, which I have to translate because the New York Times is now such trash. But in those days, it was actually a decent newspaper. So we were considered the serious newsroom of radio, and we wrote very long stories, a 45-second story, which in radio is an eternity, that would describe the federal budget. And they brought in new bosses who said to us, no, it's got to be relatable. That was the big word, relatable. Everything had to be relatable. And that was kind of coming out of relevance of the 60s. And they said, look, nobody cares about the federal budget. What they care about is sex. What they care about is AIDS. They care about, we want to talk about condoms. We want to talk, the first time on earth that people were talking about anal sex on the air, and everybody was just so thrilled and delighted that this could finally be, this taboo had been broken. We could finally be discussing this all important issue. And in the middle of this, Gary Hart dares them to find his mistress, who was hiding in plain sight. And the funny thing about this was the argument, they called it at the time the character issue. I don't know if they still use that phrase, but it was character. And I would scream at people. I haven't done this since this. This is how long it's been since I actually lost my temper, where I would scream at people and say, look, our job is to tell people about the federal budget so they know who to vote for. Right. That's our job. That's our actual job. But no. Now it was going to be a money-making operation. Of course, I was just a pebble washed away on the tide of this cultural movement. But the thing is, Gary Hart really stood for something. He stood for that moment when the press decided, oh, we can sell sex if we call it the character issue. We can sell sex as an aspect of a person's character, that if you cheat on your wife, you have a bad character. Now, the only reason the press liked this, and I can tell you this because I was in the meetings where the bosses would tell us this, the only reason they liked it is because people like sex and they want to hear about it. So it was really not about character. It was not about politics. It was just about sex. But now it has devolved to the point where that's all we talk about, basically.
That's right. And they almost cop to this in the movie. They're batting this around the Washington Post, Miami Herald. A reporter needs a story. He needs to get something to keep his job, basically. And they say, well, if he's cheating on his wife, that really matters. And they say, well, if he's cheating on his wife and that really matters, we're going to have to throw out half of the Senate and more of the Congress. And which is, one thing I like about the movie, too, is that two things can be true at once. These Democrat politicians can be cad, dirty, rotten, empty-suited nobodies, and the media can be hacks. It's not an either or. It can be both of those. And it does explore that moment because as far as I can tell, the left does not have an answer about this. And whenever they're complaining about the degradation of the media, the degradation of our politics, maybe we can agree, but don't forget, they started it.
That's right. And it does, it puts them in a bind, which if they dealt with it honestly, it would mean reforming their business. But they're not going to do that. If they said, well, wait, if we do this, we have to do it to everybody. But now, the Brett Kavanaugh thing was actually in some way Gary Hart's bastard child. If you can just once you can just accuse somebody of something that happened allegedly 35 years ago without any proof, then you've gone way, way beyond the character issue into just pure human destruction. And at least with Gary Hart, they followed him and got pictures of his mistress on his lap. They never did anything like that. If you're a conservative, they don't do anything like that. They just accuse you and you're done.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
There's also a lesson here, I think, from Gary Hart and from Kavanaugh. They always focus with Gary Hart on how he never let anyone into his personal life. Obviously not. He'd separated from his wife at times. He had these mistresses. He didn't want people to come in. He was a little bit more old school senator. He just wanted to smile and be a hairdo and spout his talking points. But when you see someone like Kavanaugh or Gary Hart, someone the public doesn't really know very well, then the media can spin the narrative, and maybe it's a true narrative, maybe it's a completely fabricated narrative, but it's in their hands. Whereas someone like Donald Trump, who says, I love cheating on my wife, I love sleeping with my friends' wives, it's one of the joys of life, it might be ugly, but it put him in control of that narrative. And in many ways, it's a product of this moment in the 1980s.
It is funny, too, how Trump, in some ways, though Trump himself can be childish, he's really treating us like adults by telling us everything. You know, he says the quiet part out loud, and we just have to either take it or not take it. Hey, another kingdom we should mention out today, the 8th. You know, this is coming to an end. This ends before Christmas, I guess.
That's right. I got a lot of hate mail because of the break. You know, we always take a break when it comes to, you know, to do a little interview.
Yeah.
But we've got another episode out today. It's doing shockingly well.
I know, yeah, it's great.
I can't believe it. It's doing a lot better than this movie that I just saw, The Front Runner. I think we've got way more views than Hugh Jackman got, so that's a big win.
It's a better story.
It's been a lot of fun. I go to these speeches, and then people come up to me. They say, Michael, I love you. I love the show. I say, oh, thank you so much. Did you see last Thursday's episode? They say, no, not your show, stupid. Another Kingdom. So
yes, you're much better. You're much better as Austin Riley than as yourself.
Yeah.
So, Austin Lively. I'm sorry, I got my own character's name wrong. Do you have a show today?
I do have a show today.
What are you talking about?
We are going to be talking about the two Americas that Brian Stelter is so upset about. Oh, nobody's talking about global warming just because illegal aliens are killing Americans. Can you imagine? Two Americas.
All right. Well, travel safe, buddy. It's good to see you, and I'll see you when you get back.
See ya.
All right.